Hey guys, I'm Anna Hammond. I'm a senior English major, and as an English lit major, I'm not necessarily much of a performer, but what I am is a giant nerd, and especially when it comes to things like Shakespeare. So what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is Shakespeare, and specifically about what are called his problem plays, and be prepared for the nerding out to happen. Okay, so I'm going to start by giving you guys a little bit of a definition of what a problem play is, in case you've never heard of it. I'm going to go into more detail about this later, but basically what a problem play is, at its most basic level, is a play that can't easily fit into one of the three genres. So this critic, his name is Bellringer, his main idea here is that the problem plays are different from the three genres that I just mentioned because they sort of have their own moral universe. I think what he means by this is that they have an underlying theme of ethics, morality, a deeper meaning than some of the other plays, especially the comedies. What is accurate in Bellringer's statement is that this moral universe in the problem plays seems to go far beyond the rest of the plays that are considered in normal genres. Okay, so this particular article is actually an annotation of a bigger work by Ira Clarke. And what Ira Clarke does in her commentary is she breaks down the characteristics of problem plays into more understandable entities. Her terms are very complicated, and so what I'm going to do is break them down into layman's terms, and I think it'll help us better understand different, more specific characteristics of problem plays. So the first thing she says is that there's a juxtaposition of different speech patterns between characters depending on class. So imagine an upper class person using really complicated verse, whereas a lower class character would be using less sophisticated speech. There's also figurative language, which is ambiguous and hard to decipher. That's another thing that makes it a problem play, is that it doesn't give critics an easy time. There are satirical characterizations, which make the plays more enjoyable and also make it easier to have a hard time classifying them in a genre because they're actually poking fun at the characters. And the last thing is confusing proverbs that have confusing meanings. If you've read any of the problem plays, you know this to be true. There will be little bits of wisdom in there, but they're not exactly black and white, so you can't really tell what they're trying to communicate. Okay, so Krims, the author of this source, he's an interesting person to analyze because he's actually a psychologist himself. So obviously he doesn't do an actual interview with Beatrice since she's a fictional character, but what he does do is a mock interview with what he believes would be responses based on Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing. And so even though I disagree with some of the things he comes up with as a response for Beatrice, I think he really helps understand why she helps us to classify Much Ado About Nothing as a problem play instead of just a comedy. What you can glean from this interview is that throughout the course of Much Ado About Nothing, Beatrice goes from being an admirable character, a heroine for feminists and people who are activists for women's rights, and she's independent, she doesn't need a man basically, and in the end ends up married off to Benedict. And so Krims is really trying to understand why she chooses this path. And I think the fact that she does choose this path makes the ending of Much Ado About Nothing much more problematic and really troubling for the audience. Okay, so Margolis here talks about another important factor in problem plays, and that's the fact that once you finish reading or viewing a problem play, nothing really makes very much sense. What I mean by that is that the ends are all super ambiguous, they all have conflicting meanings, and you could draw a bunch of different conclusions from the meaning of each one. And so a good example of this theory is Merchant of Venice. Merchant of Venice is widely considered a comedy and classified in that genre, but the reason this is problematic, according to Margolis' principle, is that in the end, no one is particularly happy, except for maybe Portia, because she always gets what she wants. So I think that this critic, Trepanier, understands something really important about The Merchant of Venice and also problem plays in general, and that's the fact that all signs point to Shakespeare not really wanting us to draw concrete or black and white meanings from these plays, but wanting us to explore the ambiguity and understand that there are a bunch of different possible conclusions at the end of each one. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go through a few more problematic elements in the problem plays I've named, because these critics did a good job of covering them, but I think there's a lot more to be said. And I'm going to do this by reading sort of a speech from each one, some short and some long, and explaining what makes it problematic. So in Much Ado About Nothing, there are tons of problematic elements, but I'm going to focus on just one, and it can be seen in this speech by Beatrice. What should I do with him? Dress him in my apparel and make him my waiting gentlewoman? He that is more than a youth is not for me, and he that is less than a man, I am not for him. So this really shows how Beatrice in the beginning was a super independent hero for all of the girls in the audience, especially in Shakespeare's time. And the reason that this points toward a problem in the play is that this Beatrice is completely gone by the end, and she's replaced by a love-struck woman, and that is not a happy ending in the eyes of a lot of viewers. So that's really what makes Much Ado About Nothing problematic. Okay, so one of the most important characters in Measure for Measure is Isabella. Long story short, Isabella spends a lot of her time all throughout the entirety of the play talking about how she's a nun, she's sworn to celibacy, she harshly rejects any man that comes her way, even though she's beautiful and a lot of men want to be with her. And then there's this weird part at the end that really makes this play problematic, where the Duke says, "Give me your hand and say you will be mine." And instead of harshly rejecting him, like she has up until this point, Isabella either awkwardly shrugs it off, or just laughs at him, or maybe even eventually agrees to marry him. But there's really no outright answer ever given. That's one of the super problematic elements in this play, because Isabella was also another strong female character that the audience was rooting for that kind of lost her valor at the end. Okay, so a lot of critics write Midsummer Night's Dream off as a comedy way too quickly. I think one of the things that really makes this particular one a problem play is the relationship between Demetrius and Helena. So in the beginning, Helena is chasing Demetrius around, and Demetrius is not only warding off her advances, he doesn't even do it in a classy way. He calls her a slut multiple times, threatens to rape her in the woods, and then, in the end, Demetrius gives this speech. Lysander, keep thy Hermia, I will none. If e'er I loved her, all that love is gone. My heart to her but as guest-wise sojourned, and now to Helen it is home, returned, there to remain. So, are we just going to ignore the fact that Demetrius is only saying these things because he's under a spell, and also the fact that the spell could wear off? He could realize he doesn't love Helena, and Helena could be mistreated the same way as she was before. I don't think that you can call this play a comedy because of those things. Okay, Merchant of Venice is actually my favorite of Shakespeare's problem plays for a variety of reasons. I'm just going to go ahead and read this speech to you guys and explain a little bit more. So this is Shylock. Shylock is supposed to be the bad guy. And he says, "Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why, revenge. The villainy you teach me I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction." So I think the reason that this points to Merchant of Venice being a problem play is that it gives the bad guy a backstory and makes him a sympathetic character. When you have a bad guy like Shylock, who has been mistreated by Christians, who calls them out as being hypocrites because of his past, it can't be a straight comedy because the audience is left feeling bad for Shylock in the end when he loses. So, in conclusion, to me, the term problem play is kind of off-putting to describe these plays. I think what it really means is that these just can't be confined to normal critical standards. And I think that's because they're so complex, so ambiguous, and that's what makes them Shakespeare's best works. They make you feel bad for the bad guys, they make you uncomfortable with the treatment of his characters, they make you question a deeper meaning in life, and I think altogether they make Shakespeare his own special kind of genius.